Good day, everyone. Once again, a special welcome to you all. My name is Maphefo. I'm from the speaker's firm. I would like to welcome and thank you for coming and choosing today specifically to join the EmpowaEntrepreneurs Digital Conversations, a COVID-19 discussion hosted by EmpowaWorks. Special welcome to Ms. Maphefo Anno-Frempong, CEO of the Transport Education Training Authority, TETA. She will deliver the keynote in a few minutes. We have a broad representation of stakeholders joining us directly via Zoom, and they will post their questions directly on the chat box in the chat room. There will be a Q&A at the end of the keynote, and we'll respond to as many of those questions as possible. To get a direct invite to the next talk that is happening tomorrow on the 7th of May, 2020, the talk will be by Tom Mkonazi, CEO of the Wholesale and Retail Sector Education and Training Authority, WRCETA. Contact the following number, 082-088-5262. Remember, this direct line allows you to be part of the Zoom conversation. Also, you can visit the EmpowaWorks website, where you'll also get all the other information about other properties that EmpowaWorks has. Empower Men, Empower Women, Empower Youth, the Speakers Firm, Leadership Summits, and events that we host. We are live on the following EmpowaWorks digital platforms: YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and the hashtag that we are always following is EmpowaEntrepreneurs. The transport sector is at the core of any economy and society. During this lockdown period, this must have been a challenging time for this particular sector. That is why we have invited the CEO of TETA, Ms. Maphefo Anno-Frempong, to talk to us. Over to you, CEO.
Thank you so much, Roy. What an interesting time to be alive, where it is indeed as unpredictable, as uncertain, and as complex as one can imagine. It is indeed a privilege from the TETA side to get an opportunity to connect and share with potential partners, friends, and those that could also come to the table with regards to what can we do as TETA to respond to COVID-19, what I term COVID-19 disruptive strategy. Clearly, COVID-19 has affected the SETA, and it has affected the sector as a whole. And for us, as an authority which has a responsibility and a mandate in the areas of skills development, research, monitoring, and evaluation, we've just seen that we cannot let this crisis deter us from coming up with a responsive strategy. What I believe COVID-19 has done for all of us, it has just demonstrated all of us that we are living in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, and this is going to be the new normal. And our responses can either have a positive or a negative impact. So in this time, we are all making sense of the circumstances that change daily and adapting to a fast-changing reality that is quite overwhelming, but at the same time requiring that we respond in an exceptional way. So I believe COVID-19 requires exceptional leadership from all sectors of the society. In the transport sector, I believe the impact of COVID-19 is such that we have to come up with responses as fast as we can. If I look at the sector as a whole, it has been affected in a manner unimaginable. And it is even worse that even before COVID-19 came across, we had already started realizing that the sector was facing a dwindling economy. And as a result, we as an institution that has to see and to be at the core of skills development, had to find ways of how we can respond to the changes as we were seeing them. So COVID-19 just added on a pressure that we were already having. Now, if one looks at the transport sector, it's a demand-driven industry, which is at the core and at the center of social and economic development. I mean, if anything has to move, it has to move through one form or the other of the transport sector modes. So therefore, you can't do anything without the transport sector being at the core of the movement of goods, movement of people. So the transport sector is a network industry that is made up of different types of vehicles in the different modes, which are called transit units, but it also has to work across a network of the different modes, be it rail, be it road, be it aviation, and even be it maritime. But it also works closely with interchanges, be it the ports, the airports, the bus stops, the ranks, and even the train station. And therefore, the transport sector is required to support South Africa to respond to the COVID-19 lockdown. I believe all of us, even if we were to be locked down, we still need to get essential items provided to us, brought to our homes, or go to somewhere to get either some form of item that you need. Some people need to get to work, essential workers need to travel, industries that have been identified as essential also need to use the transport mode. So not only do you need workers that utilize the different transport modes, but individual citizens need to get to the hospital, they need to get to pharmacies, they need to get to shops to buy essential items. And therefore, even if we were under lockdown 5 the last time, and now we have moved into lockdown 4, the transport sector is still at the core of any movement that happens. I believe in order for us to really have a discussion of how best to respond, it is important that I focus on the following aspects in this discussion today. The impact of COVID-19 in the different subsectors and the modes of transport. And the second part would be to say, if that impact is like that, what skills are in demand currently, and what kind of skills would be in demand post-COVID, and what kind of skills would one need to identify in collaboration with all of our role players to be developed and to be rolled out in the coming future, as unpredictable as it is. And I believe it is important to then talk about what kind of training would need to be in place. I mean, currently with COVID-19, we've got training that needs to proceed, and what kind of things can we do during COVID-19 lockdown, different levels, and even post-COVID-19. We also want to look at how would the training look like in the future? What kind of models can be implemented in different sectors of what we call the PSET system, post-school education and training system, and what kind of response does TETA have, not only at the organization level, but at the sector level, in terms of the different categories and the facets of our beneficiaries that we have. So coming to the transport sector and how it is set up, we all know that we've got 4 modes, but for the transport sector, we have divided those 4 modes into additional 4 interlinkages of other modes, and the transport sector from a skills development point of view has got 8 modes. So the first mode would be your rail sector, the second mode would be the aviation sector, the third mode would be the road sector. And under the road sector, we've got the trucking industry, which we call road freight, and then we also have forwarding and clearing, which is the courier services that either move goods from the airspace or move goods from maritime, from the vessels, from the harbors to the distribution channels. And then we also have a sector that we call freight handling that entirely looks at warehouses and distribution centers. Then we have the taxi industry. We've got the road passenger industry, which is the industry bus, public transport on buses. And then we have the maritime industry as another industry. So in total, we've got the 8 subsectors. Looking at the ones that have been impacted currently, and starting with the taxi industry, the long distance taxis have been affected a great deal. By virtue of the fact that there's no longer movement across provinces except for these few days where people are being allowed to come to work, those that had been locked down during the time of phase 5, the long distance taxi industry has come to a grinding halt. What that means is that there's no movement of passengers on those routes, and what the impact therefore is that industry is affected. Secondly, those that are in local communities that are moving at 70% capacity are affected by obviously the social distancing that needs to be in place, and therefore they are not moving at the usual volumes of passengers that they used to move, especially because not everybody has been allowed to go back. So only those groups of people that are using public transport, especially taxis, that are moving is not anywhere near the volumes that are moved in the taxi industry. The other industry that is completely affected negatively is the aviation industry, except for expatriation of our citizens that are stuck in different parts of the world. The aviation industry, especially the airlines, are completely affected. And with the airlines affected the way they are, what that means is that there's no economic movement in that area. And as one can read news headlines and see what is currently happening, is that most of our top contributors in terms of the revenue that we get for skills development, be it SAA, be it ComAir, be it Kolula, be it Mango, be it SAA Express, are affected by what is happening. Not only airlines, but even Dinel, which is one of our core area of developing artisans, is also affected and was even affected before COVID-19 happened. Moving out of the airline space and moving into airports themselves, moving into the main contributor of the revenue, being AXA, the Airports Company of South Africa, and ATNS, those are also affected, and many other linkages in the airspace and aviation space are affected by virtue of this complete lockdown. And then coming to the freight industry, which is the trucking. To a large extent, the volumes of trucks on the roads are not as many as they were before. And what that really does is that it has impacted the volumes of cargo. Initially, it was essential cargo. Now it is moving a little bit towards really moving different types of cargo. And then moving into the rail industry, we all know that during lockdown Schedule 5, the rail industry had stopped. Now, to a large extent, there is an easing, starting with Gautrain that started this week, and many other commuter trains are not moving, and to a large extent, such that PRASA has been affected as well. Moving into the maritime space, another key economic contributor being the cruise ships and even the vessels that are moving goods in and out of the country. The goods are moving in and out of the country, but unfortunately, the cruise ships are no longer allowed to move. And if one looks at the bus industry, the bus industry is also affected. With lockdown 4, we have seen an easing a little bit of the bus industry, but the part that is affected, unfortunately, is the cross-border bus passenger transport, as well as buses that are moving interprovincially as well. But one part of the bus industry that has been affected is the small bus operators that are moving young students and young peoples from one school to the other. And that industry is completely now come to a grinding halt. So if one looks at the different parts of the transport sector that are affected, it really affects the majority and the bulk of it. Looking at the taxi industry being as informal as it is, the part that is affected in the taxi industry is initially the way taxis are moving they depend on taxis moving throughout the day. So initially with Log 5, they were reduced to a few hours. What that does, it impacts negatively on the drivers that work on a number of targets. So what this does is that it just increases the burden on the country as a whole in terms of the kind of relief packages that need to be provided for a whole range of other sectors. Not forgetting that there's an informal sector of courier services that currently might not be operating the way they used to, in a sense that if you go to Massmart, you go to different shopping centers, you would find that there are people that have bought maybe a truck or maybe a buggy that on an informal basis would have an agreement with a shop and be able to deliver goods from one place to the next. So that informal economy as well has been affected. So having said that, what can the transport sector do in order to respond to those negative effects? I think if one looks at the facts, if one looks at, for example, the courier sector, there is an opportunity to identify the industry that is becoming a real industry in demand, which is as far as even if we are not in lockdown or in lockdown, we would still need food. So in order for food parcels to be distributed to different places and also assist by possibly finding ways of avoiding people standing in queues, as we have seen in different places, and exposing themselves to getting infected. It could be an opportunity if there were people that have got small trucks and small buggies and any form of transportation, including trailers, if they could find a way to form a network and form partnerships and find ways in which they can provide services, particularly and take procurement opportunities that are in government as a start and ultimately later on move into the private sector. I read an article recently that there was a company that is using an app to distribute parcel now that people are going online. And within a short space of time during COVID-19, that company moved from maybe having 10 people working for it to having 450 working for it because of the high demand of goods that needed to be distributed to people's houses. And I'm thinking that could be an opportunity if we put all of our heads together for transportation, for those small business owners. Not only for the small business owner, I see an opportunity where we can facilitate skills development and linkages and partners as an entity that is tasked with this responsibility to bring taxis, long distance taxis, possibly as a start in each of the provinces, possibly looking at where the greatest demand of the distribution of PPEs, the distribution of medicine, the distribution of goods, the distribution of food parcels, that if it was to be that TITA gets into partnership with municipalities, gets into partnerships with different government entities and find a space where the taxis, depending on the size of the taxi and depending on the goods that could be distributed, seats could be taken out for the duration of the lockdown as a response during the crisis, and then they can distribute parcels and distribute different parcels. I believe we can also be contributing to a large extent in flattening the curve or even reducing the exposure that elderly people do have when they have to get to the shop in order for them to buy food. People that are vulnerable, going out in large numbers with no social distancing simply because they can't get they need to get essential items. So the taxi industry, including the small bus operators, some of them have got Avanzas, some of them have got 22-seaters, some of them have got 16-seaters. They could for a while take out the seats depending on demand and just really work in a two-pronged way. Initially, they will built for purpose for passengers, but now we could find ways for those to be in the interim utilized for the distribution of different parcels. What distribution does, it can create jobs for packers, it can create jobs for those that need to be moving things out of the place where the distribution is to the locations where the things need to be distributed. So I see an opportunity for the taxi industry, long distance taxi industry. I see an opportunity for those that are involved in scholar transport, and I'm also seeing an opportunity for those that have got small trucks and 2-ton trucks or even barges to get an opportunity to be involved in responding one way or the other towards where the greatest need is. Coming to the taxi industry, I see an opportunity for the taxi industry as well to be educated and to play a key role, not only in transporting passengers, but also educating people and they themselves being safe and making sure that they comply with the COVID-19 social distancing requirements, and in a way being involved in ensuring safety. And that is an area that I believe we can get involved. Another area which though is a bit costly and it wouldn't really work for a small, micro and medium enterprise would be the usage of drones to distribute parcels, especially in deep rural areas. That in that way, drone distribution of goods using drones, as has been in places like Rwanda, where medicine is being distributed by drones. I believe maybe the stimulus packages that government is talking about could go a long way in distributing packages. It would be quite responsive if we could limit the way in which elderly people have to go and stand in queues, vulnerable people go and stand in queues in order for them to get access to goods. Now, those are the areas where there are potential opportunities which currently are threats. I see that health is a new thing, and therefore the transport industry is still going to play a key role in health. If it happens that the infections reach a level that we have seen in other parts of the world, and unfortunately large numbers of people might be affected, there might be a need for transportation, unfortunately, of people that have deceased and ways in which those that have got the necessary transport vehicles to assist in that regard. If one looks at the maritime sector, currently it continues to transport cargo, and it will still continue to transport cargo. With the passenger in the aviation sector and the passenger in the maritime sector, there isn't really much during COVID-19 that we can do anything about it. Looking at the skills that are in demand now, the skills that are in demand now are digital skills. If you can do an app, if you can utilize a computer, if you can manage change, if you can do scheduling, if you can do distribution, anything that you can do that is based on a digital platform is a skill in demand. I actually never thought before COVID-19 that I could be able to use different forms of digital platforms in order for work to continue, given the fact that we are under lockdown. What is also more critical and the skills that are in demand now in COVID-19 is leadership. People that can take decisions, people that can take decisions during uncertain times, where there is no protocol, where you are moving into a path you have never moved into. Looking at the skills for the future, amazingly, when most of us hear the word 4IR and think of digitization and think of the virtual reality, think of artificial intelligence, we almost think, well, we don't think we can do it. But believe it or not, it is here. It is no longer even the skills for the future. And most of us assume that in 4IR, the more digital we are, the more automated things are, but it translates in the loss of jobs. It does translate in the loss of jobs, but it creates opportunities in other sectors. There is a World Economic Forum report that was drafted, which identified the top 10 skills that are demanded for 2020 and beyond, in order for us to make use of the move in technological advancement and advances. And amazingly, these skills, when I researched and I looked at them, they apply across all occupations and across all industries. And the skills are as follows. One of the skills that is in demand for 4IR is the cognitive flexibility, how easily and how quickly you can swing, you can leap, and you can twirl back in between different thought patterns and come up with a new way of thinking, expand your interests, think outside what we call the box, and embrace new things. That is a skill. Now, most of us would think, well, that is a skill, that is a soft skill, but it is a soft skill that will enable all of us to adapt to changes that are unpredictable. The second skill that is in demand is negotiation skills. You know, with robots infiltrating the workforce and job automation being the new thing, social skills are quite important because robots by themselves are input driven. So interpersonal skills, being able as a technical expert to talk to others, explain your thinking, do a prototype, do require a level of interpersonal skills. So when you look at all job categories, the skills that we call attributes are the skills that are in demand. One of the skills that is important is service orientation, looking for ways to anticipate what your customers need, needs, and anticipating how best to respond to those. The seventh skill is a skill of is judgment and decision making, being able to make a decision, looking at a sound decision, looking at a variety of data that is you're sifting through the numbers, finding a rational insight, and finding ways in which you can action this, and using data to inform your strategy and decision is a skill in demand. In order for you to do this, you need to be a friend of Excel, and in order for you to manipulate Excel spreadsheets, you need to be able to use those Excel spreadsheets and the data that you're extrapolating from there to make decisions. Another skill that is in demand is emotional intelligence, managing your emotions, managing the emotions of others, leaders having emotional intelligence, being able, is that intangible something that enables you to adapt, where you are able to persuade others, where you are able to really teach others, where you are able to give leadership and able to stimulate others, and being able to collaborate. So COVID-19 and 4IR forces us to collaborate because computers cannot collaborate on their own. You still need human input and you still need human interaction. A skill that is in demand now, which across all industries we need, is people management. Irrespective of how many jobs get automated, we are still going to need employees, we are still going to need human capital, we are still going to need people as our greatest assets, because human beings by their nature are more creative and they can piggyback on their ideas, and they can also unfortunately get demotivated, they can get sick, and they can also get distracted. So people management is one of the top 4IR skills for the future. Creativity is not only a skill that is associated with writers and artists and those that can dance and those that can compose songs, but it is about new ways of working, coming up with new ways of working and connecting the dots and thinking of new ideas and coming up with something new. What I have seen with COVID-19 on any given day, being a person that is in charge of an institution, I always have to come up with new things. I always have to explore new ideas, and my team also has to explore new ideas as we are all trying to adapt without knowing how things are going to pan out. Another skill that is important is critical thinking, which is being able to use logic and reasoning. It is a very important skill. And you interrogate an issue, you consider the various solutions, you weigh up the options, and you come up with a solution. Now, currently, all of us have to come up with solutions. We all have to weigh options. We almost have to weigh options without knowing what the next step is going to be, what needs to be done at what time. The most important of all the skills is complex problems solving. This tops all of the 4IR skills that are required. Ability to solve a novel and ill-defined problems that is complex, just like COVID. COVID is complex. Impact of COVID is complex. We have never encountered this in our lifetime. We are now trying to find ways to solve whatever problem that we can come up with. So with complex problem solving, you should be able to solve problems in new areas. You should be able to change at a breakneck speed and also get solutions, some of which are complex with nowhere to turn to except to use our brains and work collectively to resolve the problems. Now, most jobs across all industries require problem-solving skills as one of the core skills, and all the skills get honed. Nobody is born with it. Fortunately, over time, you can build it on a strong foundation, and you can then have people that have got critical thinking, people that have got exponential thinking, people that have got lateral thinking. Having said all of that, the comforting thing about this top 10 skills as identified by the World Economic Forum, they are all skills that can be honed. And I believe as we respond to COVID-19 and what the future looks like in the transport sector, we might have to say, okay, what is it that we can do to develop these different skills and work with the industry and the role players to make that possible. If we look at training now, how does it look like? Current training, in the traditional sense, training is on a contact base. But during COVID-19, training completely changes. In fact, post-COVID-19, it looks like training will change. Now, the Quality Council for Trade and Occupations has allowed the SETAs to use blended learning or use a multiplicity of different modes of learning in order to allow the beneficiaries that most SETAs are funding for different programs, be it artisans, be it learnerships, be it how we can do research and how we can even engage with monitoring and evaluation. So currently, different role players are using different models. Those that are quite adaptable are now using different platforms like Google Classrooms, using different online platforms. So the classroom of the future and the classroom currently in COVID-19 cannot work without the usage of data, without the usage of different technology items. And therefore, I do not even imagine that going out of COVID-19, that classrooms will remain the same as they were. Even if you can put screens, even if they can be social distancing, there will be still a level of fear, especially when it pertains to young people and those that have to be traveling in public transport and be exposed to large numbers. There would still be a need to use a multimodal teaching and a learning system. For the transport sector, this would require an investment in technology devices, which do not come cheap. It would also mean that we need data, which is also not cheap. But for the transport sector, we are currently having partnership discussions with the networks to see if they can zero-rate data for the beneficiaries that we have in the different levels of the education and training space. For an example, in the transport sector, we've got 54 schools that we have adopted throughout the country, and these schools are in rural areas. So what we are thinking would work for us is for those schools to adopt online learning platforms. Through the partnership, we are engaging with network providers for them to zero rate data, and then we can then have some those that produce devices to come on board together with us to see how we can make it easy even for those that are in rural areas, especially those that are doing grade 12 in the schools that we have adopted and going out down to the other grades, in order for them, now that there is no contact lessons, how best they can proceed. One of the other things that we are also exploring mainly in our discussions with our role players is how we can use community radio stations and use TV and community radio TVs, including the SABC, in order for some lessons to be recorded, and then the learners can then find ways to make sense with those lessons. For those that are our bursary recipients, we have a total of 1,200 bursary recipients in TVET colleges and higher education training institutions. We're thinking of exploring ways in which there could be zero-rated data for them. We are not in any way able as an institution, with the dwindling revenues that we have, to provide laptops and provide devices that are quite steep. But we believe in partnership, we can find ways in which the recipients can then get access to online platforms. For the other beneficiaries,
I was thinking there's so many questions here that you're going to run out of time. Let's address those, and then the last 5 minutes we can use to wrap up some of the points that you still needed to do. I'm not sure if you're able to see the chat box on your side to respond to some of those questions.
The chat box. Okay. I can pick up anyone.
You can pick any.
How do we engage with, I don't know, there's something that says, how can we engage with TH to offer our school bus services to those opportunities you have identified? The best way is to send an email to the TITA. I will give the email towards the end of the program, where we can now see how best we can take these opportunities for the school bus services forward. Another question says, what kind of partnership models are readily available for TITA to assist business owners, taxis, cross-border buses to adjust to the current operating realities? And what about, so the first part of the question is about what partnership models, which is connected to the first one. And the second one is, what about licensing requirements, which may hamper the agility required for these adjustments? In particular, are there already processes underway to address this through regulations, or is it mainly in the medium and the long term? As an answer to your question, there is an economist stimulus program that few sectors that are affected by this have been identified to play a role. TITA has been identified to play a role in the transportation, distribution, and logistics space. The manufacturing SETA, which is MERSETA, has been identified for the manufacturing space. And the CHIETA, which is the chemical industry SETA, has been identified for their sector as well. And two other SETAs, being the fiber processing SETA, has been identified to be part of this, including the services SETA. So what we as the SETAs are doing currently is to engage with different role players to see how best we can come up with a business case to make this a reality. And one of the role players that Transport SETA would have to engage with is the transport regulatory authorities like the RTMC and the Department of Transport as well, to ensure that in the long run, there should be some adjustments that should be done with regards to regulations. And obviously, anything that we are going to do is going to form part of the stimulus response, and it is going to obviously be taken through the different layers of government to ensure where there needs to be exceptions to be made, that those exceptions should be made. But I see this more in the medium term, and I see the need to really congregate and bring up a business case being a short term, And then in the long run, amendments would have to be made to legislation because legislative amendments are a bit long term. However, regulations can be provided under the Disaster Management Act because this is not a normal, it's a new normal. It's not something that is usual. And then the second question says, do we get masks to our commuters and sanitizers of places like Gautrain and the like? And what about thermal imaging and sterilization solutions? Are they being considered? These are being considered as part of PPE. And as I said, different role players would have to get involved for PPE purposes, for social distancing purposes, and also from a skills development purpose. How do we get involved is another question. Can your organization link us up with these opportunities? Indeed, Tita will link you up with these opportunities. What I need is people to send emails. There's a team that has been set up in order for us to go and submit a proposal to the ministers that an interministerial task team that is looking at how to make this stimulus response program to be such that it is as responsive and it is as inclusive as I have suggested. There's another one that says, thank you for the opportunity. I'm Olivia Maponya. I would like to find out from Tita if there are any measures in place to assist passenger transport companies with funding of the programs to address COVID-19 through awareness campaign for passengers by organizations in an attempt to cap the spread and for employees regular trainings through digital platforms. Obviously, Tita operates, even though Tita has got opportunities, but currently with the different COVID-19 measures that have been identified even by the president, we must all understand the revenue is dwindling. In fact, for the coming 4 months, starting from this month, in line with what the president has announced, SETAs would not be getting any revenue because the skills development levies, companies have been given a skills development levies payment holiday. What that translates to is that there's a dwindling of the budget that was already dwindling before. However, that should not stop us from finding measures that we can identify and work collaboratively with all role players, especially to raise awareness through digital platforms like this. Now, there's another question that says, for the facilitator, I think this is for you. Will you consider a follow-up session with the DOT so that some of these ideas are socialized and regulatory responses are run in tandem? Because without regulations, the required adaptation and agility is stymified. I totally agree with this one. That is why there needs to be a collaboration with everyone. There's a question, does government has a strategy to incorporate different modes of transportation, that is buying a ticket to use on the city bus, but that also works in Gautrain? I feel there's still a lot of silo strategies. In fact, there is a project that seeks to address this, which Tita is engaging with Gauteng Transport Authority that is being established in order to see how we can have a seamless ticketing system where you get out of a metro rail, you get into a bus, you get into a taxi, which would incorporate what you're talking about, the ticketing systems. But obviously, it would need to be piloted. There are ideas on the table, and these ideas, with all collaboration, can then come into realization. The good thing is we can't say, well, we are now in lockdown, we can't have a conversation. We can have a conversation like we're having now. We can present ideas. We can see how best we can work rather than take this as a holiday. I'll be guided by you, facilitator. There are 3 questions. One question says, how do we offer no lenses learning to assist continuous professional development, ongoing solutions, and bring financial literacy solutions to all participants in the transport industry. In our support for SMMEs, one of the things that SMMEs have identified as a key thing is how to manage cash flow, how to manage finances, and how to manage a business. And these are some of the things that currently some of the small bus operators nationally are actually implementing a program of making sure people can comply and also learning how to bring financial literacy solutions in the transport industry. Can we assist with satellite and community broadcasting for rural learners? Yes, of course you can assist. And then somebody else says, hi Trevor, we might be able to assist. Okay, so there's somebody already saying we can on this platform work together. We definitely would appreciate any form of ideas, any form of collaboration by the role players on this platform and beyond this platform. It is our mandate as an entity that is involved in skills development, education and training to bring all the role players together. In fact, SETA's role are to be brokers of connectivities between the TVETs, between higher education, between the private providers, even between employers, as well as different role players, be it community cooperatives, be it community-based organizations, youth formations that are headed by women. So there is an opportunity, I believe, during this COVID-19 to come up with different ways in which we can partner together. One of the key things that has been identified in the skills development strategy is that SETAs, they just are in the middle and they can play a partnership and a networking role with all the role players and almost bring different role players together to see how best we can still be globally competitive in the transport sector and beyond. So I'll be guided by you, facilitator.
Yes, I think there might be one more question, but I had said we can use the last 5 minutes to wrap up on what we hadn't covered.
Okay.
The last question that I see there, it says, the SETA staff, are they back at work?
Yeah. We're currently working with the guidelines, and we are making the organization ready for a third of the staff complement to be back at work. But we are also still working online. Ever since we were under lockdown, we have always been working, but it is not going to be the entirety of the staff members of TITA that are going to be back at work. Is going to be a third. In fact, as it is now, we are implementing protocols. One of the things we're doing now, we are disinfecting the entire premises of TITA. We are likely not to allow our Durban office staff and Cape Town office staff to be back at work by virtue of the fact that Cape Town is an epicenter and even KZN, eThekwini is also proven to be having high exposure to COVID-19, and those would really work as far as possible online. For those that are in Randburg, our head office is going to be a third of staff, but we are currently looking at the different protocols of social distancing, ensuring that we get masks for them, ensuring that we've got dispensers, queue markers. So we encourage our stakeholders to use online platforms to get ourselves ready. Most of our managers have got Zoom licensing now. They can continue with work online. They can engage with stakeholders online. We anticipate our sector skills plan to be done online. We anticipate site visits to be explored, to be done online as well. We are anticipating coming up with a sectoral response as required by the QCTO to ensure that learners that are needing to do summative assessment, trade tests, integrated summative assessments to go back to the workplaces in order for them to finalize those. But we are also looking at a response of identifying how ready our private providers and role players are in terms of implementing blended and multimodal learning platforms. So ever since COVID-19 has started, we have been as busier as before, but I am confident that we will actually find new ways of doing things with COVID-19 being a reality as it is now.
Just if you can just give me one highlight, the one thing that some of us may not even be aware of that you are particularly proud of in terms of TETA, as we close off. If you can just take 1 minute, because sometimes there are things that you know that we should have asked you that you're particularly proud of.
I'm proud of the fact that we have been as agile as we have been. One of the things that I'm very proud of is a small bus operator online program. We before COVID-19, we signed a contract, and the contract was to do skills development for compliance for small bus operators. But when COVID-19 came, out of 120 beneficiaries, 50 beneficiaries were able to go online, and the program is running online. So they're doing they're doing their assessments online, they're doing their exercises online, they're doing simulated learning online. I'm actually proud of a small formation like that being able to respond as quickly as it is. One other program I'm very proud of is the program we have, which is a hashtag TETA Cares, hashtag TETA Road Safety Program, which we are using digital platforms like YouTube, Twitter, Facebook Live to actually make people aware of safety from a road safety component and moving over to COVID-19 awareness as well. So I'm proud of those two initiatives by small, medium, micro enterprises that are working in partnership.
Thank you very much, Ms. Maphefo Anno-Frempong, CEO of Transport Education Training Authority, TETA. We really appreciate your presentation and the part in which you delivered, and we wish you well. Transport sector is the backbone of everything that happens. And to everybody that joined us directly via Zoom, having used the WhatsApp number 082-088-5262, we really appreciate you, and we invite you to use the same number and be on the lookout for the next conversations. I would like to thank everyone that followed us on all the EmpowaWorks digital platforms for this digital conversations during this lockdown period to make sure that we stay informed so that we can play an active role in making sure that we make our country work and the economy work. Thank you, everyone, and bye-bye, and look out for the next speakers as I had mentioned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.